Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. If you are looking for the online information session about budgets and financial planning with the CBRD, you are absolutely in the right place. Thank you so much for joining us today on this sunny afternoon. We really appreciate you setting aside some time over your lunch hour to learn more about this important process. My name is Colleen Dane, and my role today is to help this session move smoothly through the presentation and then the Q&A session that will follow. Ingrid Sy is here to help us on the technical side and hopefully help keep us all rolling together in the right direction. Our goal with this webinar today really is to provide you with an introduction to the CBRD's budgeting process and provide an overview about how they develop their financial plans. And the hope ultimately is that kind of with more understanding, it enables more people like you and your friends to participate in this important annual process moving forward. So we have three important people with us today who will be contributing to the presentation from the CBRD. We have James Warren, the Deputy Chief Administrative Officer. We have Lucy Witcherak, the Chief Financial Officer, and Kevin Duville, our Manager of Financial Planning. So these are certainly the experts when it comes to the financial planning process ahead. So we look forward to their presentation, and I know they'll be able to help with any questions that you have. We expect the presentation will take about 25 to 30 minutes, and then we'll move to a Q&A session after that. And before we dive into that presentation, there's just a couple quick housekeeping items I want to touch base on before we really get rolling. So using this webinar format, we collect questions from attendees using the Q&A tool. So you can find that in the bottom black bar of your Zoom screen. There's a little Q&A with two kind of dialogue buttons as bubbles as the icons. If you click on that, you can type in your questions. We will get to them at the end of the presentation, but you are welcome to drop them in at any time so you don't lose them as we go ahead. And then we will start putting them forward to the presenters when we get to that point of the afternoon. You can make your question anonymous by clicking the box in the Q&A area so that when it's posted, it doesn't get posted with your name. And if there's a question that is already posted that you think is important or that you share, you can upvote it by clicking on the little thumbs up button. And that helps us just understand if there's a question that's particularly popular or a bigger priority than others. We intend to get to every question today, but should we run out of time, we'll follow up with information to address any of the questions that are left outstanding. So please feel free to post anything that's on your mind about this. And finally, we are recording the session. You might have heard that warning when you connected in here. The main goal here is that we can then share this afterwards for people who weren't able to join us at this time. But also, you know, it will be available as a reference for you moving forward if there's something that you want to look back and review again. If you're having any technical hiccups, please feel free to pop a question into the chat. Ingrid has already added a note there so that you can find her. We'll help to troubleshoot if we can from a distance as best as possible. So with that, let's get to the content that everybody's here to learn about. I'm going to pass the mic over to James. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us. James, over to you.
Thank you, Colleen, and yeah, thank you to everybody for taking the time to be with us today and letting us have an opportunity to talk about CVRD Budgets 101. Before I get started, I would like to acknowledge this meeting is being hosted virtually on the unceded traditional territory of the Comox First Nation, who are the traditional keepers of this land. Our presentation today will cover information on the CVRD budgeting process. We're going to take you on a journey from planning to approval. And we'll also have a quick tutorial on finding and reading budgets on our website. There's a lot of information to cover, and it'll include how you can get involved, and we encourage participation from residents such as yourselves and hope to see your feedback throughout the process. We do have a few poll questions that we're going to put in throughout this presentation and ask for your participation. And I think we're at the point where we're asking that first question now, and it will be, it'll be, where in the CVRD do you live? And so if you can go ahead and make your choice to where in the CVRD you live. And then I think, Colleen, you're going to close that poll when we're ready.
Yeah, I'm just seeing a couple more responses come in, and then we'll wrap it. So I'll turn it around for you there and share the results.
Perfect, thank you. So, so we have representation from the municipalities certainly, and from a couple of our electoral areas, and not anyone from Area B, and everybody does know where they live, so that's great. One point we wanted to note about these webinars is, while this participation might not be a lot of people on this call, what it does do is we record this and we post it online afterwards, and so anybody can come back and take a look and follow through, and that's certainly one of the outcomes of our presentation today. So why did we want to host a session focused on electoral area budgets? We want to help residents in our electoral areas get involved and learn more about the budgeting process. The CVRD provides about 100 different services to meet the needs of residents in the city of Courtenay, the town of Comox, the village of Cumberland, and the 3 electoral areas, being areas A, B, and C. Budgeting to provide these services is complex, but it's one that directly impacts each and every one of you, and we want to help you understand how it works. I know that input from residents is important to our elected officials as they work through this process ahead of board approval and bylaw adoption. And so this session today is intended to hopefully give you the foundation that you need to be able to participate. I'm now going to pass the presentation off to Lucy Wacharek, our Chief Financial Officer, who will talk more about the budget planning process. So Lucy, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, James, and thanks to all of you for joining today. Expanding on James' comments about the number of CVRD services offered. To be more specific, there are 102 services provided to residents throughout the Comox Valley. Each electoral area contributes to its own combination of services. Some are shared and some are specific to individual areas. For example, all 3 electoral areas contribute to the Comox Valley Search and Rescue, or the Comox Valley Emergency Program, while the service Heritage Conservation Bayne Sound is only for a defined portion of electoral area A residents and only paid for by them. In 2023, a total of 69 distinct services were provided to all or a portion of Area A, and 47 are provided to all or a portion of Area B and C. In the electoral areas, services include things like street lighting, fire protection, water supply and distribution, bylaw enforcement, planning and building inspection, as well as broader, more regional services like recreational complexes, and that's including things like exhibition grounds. While there are some overlaps between services, the electoral areas, each service must have its own expenses, revenue, and reserves planned out. So we do this by creating work plans based on priorities set by CVRD board and elected officials. So each service has its own budget, which means we consider how much money is needed to cover its costs each year, and the taxes, user fees, and other revenue collected in a service cannot be moved to another service. Each year, the regional district prepares an updated 5-year financial plan that considers how much it will cost to operate and any capital investments that will be needed to give citizens the breadth of services that they need. It is also important to ensure that we are taking care of public assets that we manage on your behalf over the long term. And this is why you will see plans to replace roofs, vehicle and equipment, and update our critical water and sewer infrastructure. Next slide, please. So now, with over 100 services, how does a budget get built? Well, a budget is created for each service, like a brick in the wall. For each brick, we determine how much it will cost and then how much money is needed to pay for it. This includes both the work in that year and preparing for the long term as well. That means considering, along with our day-to-day operations, forecasting needs for replacing those roofs and updating the equipment and the renewal of critical water and sewer infrastructure. This is why we prepare 5-year plans, so we're always looking forward and planning for what's to come. For some services, we build infrastructure plans that look forward 10 years, so we can save a little bit of money each year in anticipation. The money needed to deliver these services are raised through tax requisitions, funds from taxpayers like you and me. Budgeting for a regional district is a bit different than municipalities, or even different than your own household budgets. At home, you might be able to save up for bigger purchases, like a new refrigerator or the stove, or maybe even a full kitchen renovation, by saving money elsewhere. So let's say by driving less and walking more. That's not the case for us. Money saved in one area or a service can't be moved to cover costs of another service, because each one is paid for by a different group of residents and is calculated differently. With that basic start, I'm going to pass the presentation over to Kevin DeVale now, our Manager of Financial Planning, and Kevin's going to dive a little deeper into our budgets with you.
All right, thanks, Lucy, and thanks for setting the scene for the budget process. So over the next couple of slides, I'm going to walk folks through the CVRD budget information online. But before we actually go exploring, it's worth noting that at the core of our financial planning process is always good fiscal management and financial best practices. It means that we're working year-round towards a plan that is the most efficient financial path for us all. So let's break it down. Firstly, proposed budgets are developed by staff through each summer and fall, and then are presented to the directors at the appropriate committee, commission, or to the board directly for their review. This is always done in line, as you can see on the slide here, with respect to our board strategic drivers and their strategic plan that they revisit every June. So for example, a recreation service budget would be considered at the Recreation Commission meeting. Subsequent to that, directors review these budgets between January and March, and it is at this proposed budget stage that we're currently at. The public is always welcome to and invited to attend these budget presentation sessions, and these sessions are also posted online at www.comoxvalleyrd.ca/current-budget. After this long process is completed, after all the presentations are made, questions are raised by our directors and the public, comments and revisions are addressed, the budget is then approved by the board. By legislation, we are required to have an annual budget bylaw adopted and in place by March 31st annually. Now it's my turn for a poll question. So I believe Colleen will put that poll question up. And that question is, have you provided feedback or actively reviewed or read through the CVRD budgets in the past? And I'll just give everyone a few moments to think about that and log your answers.
See a few answers. A couple more popping in. Great. I will close it up here and share your results.
Great. Hey, yeah, no, like I said, as people can see there, generally aware, but no active participation is really where most folks are at, and that's perfectly fine. That's really kind of the benefit and the value of today's kind of presentation with you, just to get people more aware of the process and how you can continue to get involved and learn more about, those various budgets that affect you on a day-to-day basis. So thanks for that, Colleen. So then back to the presentation. Our goal here today is to help make it easier for you to participate, where you can review these budgets in order to understand how and where money is being allocated. We want to show you how to find some key pieces on our website. So I'm just going to open up a screen share here. Oh, and it's okay. Let's try that again. There we go. So hopefully everyone can see what's on their screen here. It should say learning about the CVRD financial planning process. This is where folks would land if you first went to our main homepage for the Comox Valley Regional District website. And as you can see here, we're promoting kind of, just generally, folks learning more about the financial planning process. Once you kind of land here, there are two ways you can actually navigate to the financial plan information specifically. You could either put a search icon into the share or into the search window here, such as financial plan or 23 financial plan, and that would bring up a series of options for you to click through. Or alternatively, an easier way is to go into this little About menu, go down to Finance, and you'll see an option called 23-27 Proposed Financial Plan. If you click on that, this will take you to that current budget main page. And this is always reflective as to what current budget stage we were at. So certainly visit it as often as you would like. Well, on this page, there are a number of resources for your information. We do provide a short little YouTube video that kind of outlines our annual financial planning process. We also provide some information that kind of illustrates what really drives the process. And then we've also provided the information here with respect to today's session. Below that is also a bit of a infographic that we've put together that kind of illustrates our annual financial planning process. You can actually click into this infographic to receive a bit more information about the various stages of our nearly year-long process now. The timelines illustrated here, I will get back to on a later slide, so I'll kind of jump over those for now. But really, it's here where we provide information as to how you can get involved. So where you can find particular meetings and agendas, how you can kind of watch things virtually live, where you could find the pre-recorded meeting sessions, and importantly, where you can actually submit inquiries that will then be brought forward to those various meetings. If you feel we would really like to attend a meeting and potentially speak to the directors, there is an option to be able to request to be a delegation or a presenter, and that you can click through right here, and that would open you up into a new window where you can make that request. And we've also provided a link so that you can contact any member of the board, whether that is a director within your own area or generally within the regional district board. So at this point, I'll jump into what you can see for our financial plan. So right now, as I noted, we're at our proposed financial plan stage. So you would just click on here and you'll see some options below. As we go through our process and we're now kind of presenting things to our board, you'll be able to see the presentations that are provided there. So we'll be posting these on a regular basis. But for now, you'll notice an option called Proposed Financial Plan and Capital Expenditure Program. This is a searchable PDF file of our entire financial plan as it currently sits at this proposed budget stage. So you can just click into there. And this will land you on a searchable table of content. So this outlines each of the service budgets, the 102 service budgets that Lucy had noted with respect to the various services that we provide. You can click on any one of these options and it will take you straight to a budget of particular interest you may have, or you can certainly scroll through the whole document just to get a sense of generally each service and kind of what is driving it. So to give you an example of a service budget, let's pick search and rescue. That's probably a good one. So I will click on that one. And as you can see, it takes you immediately to that service budget, and I will make it bigger for folks. So where you would land first is what we call our lead page. And this lead page just kind of outlines what the service is. It does speak to when the service was initially established and speaks to a bit about its purpose. It will also identify who or what regions within the regional district participate. So in this case, all the regions within our service area participate. That would be all 3 municipalities and all 3 electoral areas. This also gives a 5-year outlook, including a prior year actual of what is being requisitioned potentially for this service. And I'll get to that momentarily. As was mentioned earlier, really, one of our primary revenues, or cash in, as it were, is tax requisition. And that's what we requisition annually and submit to either our municipal partners or to the province. And that's the funding we require to operate our services. So I'll move into the next page, and this is a snapshot of the operating budget for this particular service. So really, this is the day-to-day as to really kind of what's driving what's going on in this particular service. So as you can see here, we do note those revenues or cash in. And really, as I just spoke to, in this particular service, really the lion's share of that is our tax requisition, outlined by the requisitions there for both the electoral areas and the municipalities. If we do have surpluses or even deficits carried forward from prior years, those would be included within this as well. On the expenditure or the cash outside, there can be a multiple number of different activities or areas where we would be expending dollars. In this particular one, the lion's share of what this service provides is operational or unconditional grants, and those go to a number of community partners such as the municipalities, organizations such as Comox Valley Search and Rescue, and other marine and search and rescue related organizations that all do great work to make sure that people are safe when they're venturing out to various locales. We also do allocate some insurance here and whatnot, which is pretty typical through any of the services we provide. If this particular service had a capital component, i.e., if we were investing in any type of infrastructure, such as buildings, land, equipment, those kinds of things, there would then be a follow-up page that would kind of outline that capital plan. And while we do operational plans for a 5-year period, we are moving towards capital plans for a 10-year period to have that greater outlook. So we have just a few more slides prior to the end of the presentation. So at this point, I will stop sharing my screen and I will pass it back to James once more. And then after that, we will be moving towards opening up the Q&A period. And if you have any questions about the elements of the budget that we've just gone over, please go ahead and post those and we can circle back to those at that time. So I'll pass it back to James.
Thank you, Kevin. So now that we've explained the practical, concrete steps it takes to build a budget, I want to add another layer that is important to this process, and that's how we get direction for our budget planning from our elected officials. As you may have seen on our process circle graphic a few slides back, the very first step in the financial planning process is the board's strategic plan. Strategic planning helps identify the board of directors' goals and vision and aligns the CVRD's service delivery with those goals. As budgets are adopted, staff look to prioritize and focus on the board's established strategic drivers. Currently, the 4 key drivers are fiscal responsibility, climate crisis and environmental stewardship and protection, community partnerships, and Indigenous relations. This means that for each service, we'll be looking at ways to enhance and focus on these priorities and building a budget that allows us to advance these goals. You can think of them each as a lens that we have to look at a budget through. For example, how is our plan for fire services showing fiscal responsibility, considering the climate, building partnerships, and improving relationships with Indigenous partners? How can it be done better? This year, there are a few more lenses that will also influence the budget. One being the corporate energy and emissions plan. The CVRD is taking direct action through electrification of its fleet and tools and looking at the greenhouse gas emissions that our buildings are putting out. A second lens would be community well-being. After a few years of focusing budget planning around the COVID recovery, we are coming out the other side and looking for ways to improve our community's well-being. Through the newly formed Community Facilities Support Services, the CVRD is working in collaboration with 12 rural community halls, providing $250,000 in operational grant support in 2023. So how are these special focus areas considered during budget planning? Well, at the January 24th regular meeting, our board adopted a new internal cost of carbon policy that sets a new internal cost of carbon at $165 a ton for every GHG in emissions that we produce in a service. Basically, what that means is we are setting aside some funds based on the amount of carbon that we produce. We're setting aside some funds to be put into GHG reduction activities in the future. And in the case of our recreation complexes service, this will result in a 2023 contribution of about $69,000. And all of those funds collected from other services will be held in those reserves for projects that will help us reduce emissions going forward. I also want to note more information about strategic planning can be found on our website, and you can see that address on the screen here. And Kevin, I think this one goes back over to you to carry on with more about budgets.
Great, thanks, James. So now that we've looked at the CVRD budgets and how they're created, what influences planning? What now? So here's a look ahead. Our budget presentation started back on January 24th with a consolidated overview to our board. And these meetings take place between now and March the 7th. As mentioned, feedback is welcomed and residents are invited to get involved. We'll have more information on how to do so at the end of this presentation. March 9th is the deadline to receive feedback on budgets, and therefore any feedback must be submitted on that day prior to 4:30 in the afternoon. On March 21st, the annual budget bylaw is to be presented to our board for first, second, and third reading. That's really how our budget is rolled up and presented to our board. And that is the legislative requirement that we are required to put in place by legislation. That bylaw will then subsequently come back for final reading and adoption on March the 23rd. And again, by that March 31st date, the CVRD is legislatively required to have our budgets approved and submitted to the province. At this point, we are going to ask another poll question.
Sorry, that one snuck up on me, Kevin. Just hang on 1
Oh,
second.
that's okay. All right. So as you can see here, how did you hear about today's session? So we provided a bunch of options there. So we'll just give folks a few minutes to make your choice and submit your answer.
One more moment, and I'm going to share the results.
Great. Okay. So various different options. Looks like a lot of people heard it on social media, which is great. Word of mouth is also great too. Bunch of others, and certainly some heard the presentation or the information that was provided on the radio recently, which is great. Thanks for that, Colleen. All right, well, thank you very much. And at this point, I'm going to pass it back to Lucy, who's going to let people know how they can get involved in our budget process for those who are new to it.
Thank you, Kevin. We want to encourage residents to join us and learn about the budget process and to share comments and input with their directors and staff. So just to come back around again and just be clear about how you can become involved. So residents can get involved and provide questions, comments, or feedback in a variety of methods, as Kevin has said, up to March 9 at 4:30 p.m. So people can participate by attending a meeting or watching a meeting, submitting your comments, questions, or feedback to Kevin by email or by calling him at 250-334-6078. People can give a presentation to the board or one of its committee through that formal delegation, or contacting a member of the CVRD board directly. Your comments and your feedback will be provided to directors during the budget process, and questions will receive a direct response. So we have one more poll question, Colleen, to do.
Actually, that was our last one, Lucy. Thank you. Yeah.
No worries. Want to make sure. Thank you. And I'm just going to go back over to Colleen now. She's going to wrap up. Thank you.
All right. Thank you to James and to Lucy and to Kevin for that presentation. I appreciate it very much. And we covered a lot of ground. I'm leaving this last slide up for a moment or two so that people can maybe scribble down any addresses they like. But again, we're posting them into the chat, and this will all be available on that website at comoxvalleyrd.ca/current budget if you want to be able to double check them. So just before we dive into the Q&A session, which we'll get to next. So if you have a question that's on your mind, I encourage you to post it so that the team here can give you some more information. To do that, you would just open up the Q&A button, which is on the black menu bar at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and type it in. There's a little checkbox you can click if you'd like your question to be posted anonymously. And so now would be a great time to add any questions there that you have. And we'll be able to put them forward to the team as we have kind of another half an hour or so of time allocated to help share more information. So I see one question has been posted, and I'm going to probably pass this first to you, James. So the question is, will EA residents be getting any recycling or garbage collection in the coming year?
Thanks, Colleen. I'm imagining this question relates back to our alternative approval process that was held in the probably a year and a half ago now or more. And no, there will not be curbside or roadside recycling and garbage collection in the rural areas that don't already have it. So we do have Royston residents currently receiving roadside collection, but there will be no expansion of that particular program, given the outcome of that approval process. Now, that being said, the Comox Strathcona Waste Management Service, the board that is responsible for waste management and the landfill operations in Cumberland and Campbell River, and also some of the smaller communities, Tassus and Spallis and whatnot. The CSWM board is currently going through a solid waste management plan review process and is looking at topics including the potential for any sort of changes to recycling and garbage collection and recycled depots and the programs around that particular waste management. So, so Colleen, I hope that answers the question.
Yes, I think that does. Thank you, James. So, and then the next question, maybe Lucy or Kevin, I'll pass this one to you. The question is, what happens to the feedback when it's sent in, either sent in by email or phoned in? Kind of what is the actual process for reviewing and considering that feedback?
Kevin, do you want to take this one since you coordinate this piece?
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So what happens if somebody were to phone me directly? Obviously, we would have a conversation. I would hopefully be able to answer your question right then and there. If you do decide to submit something through the budget inquiry section on the website, that feedback is then brought forward to the respective meeting at which potentially whatever service your question is referring to is being presented. And then that would actually be documented as part of that meeting. And then we would make an effort to be able to respond to that at that time. If you had any subsequent questions post that, then certainly we would encourage you to reach back out, and hopefully we could, kind of follow up with you and hopefully, come up with any last answers to that question.
Great, thank you. Okay, and then we had a third question come in through the Q&A, and it is asking about what kind of the top 10 services are in Area A. So I'm not sure if that's meant to be the kind of top 10 as in kind of the ones that are the most expensive, or just kind of the key one or some key ones of the 69. Not sure if that's information you have at your fingertips, Kevin, but maybe there might be a few examples you could share.
Yeah, no, I can certainly speak to that. And yeah, I mean,
Okay.
There's multiple ways to describe how you would consider a top 10, but I'll do my best. So yeah, as I said, there's a number of services delivered in Area A, partly because, it's a fairly large service area, and partly because it is also broken down into essentially three components. We have what we call our Bain Sound portion of Area A, which is kind of that south side of the main island. And then of course we have Denman and Hornby Islands that do share some services, but also have services that are distinct to themselves. So that's why there's a vast number of services provided there. Some of those services are very much regional in context. So of course, things like electoral area administration, which is really how we support our electoral area directors, or things like search and rescue, as I provided in the example. And that's a service that everybody within the regional district pays. There are a number of other services, specific to our electoral areas. So for example, Vancouver Island Regional Library, we have a library service that really provides a contribution to the regional library district. And as far as a regional district service goes, only our electoral areas participate in that, because of course our municipal partners pay into that separately through their own means. This would also include services like 911 call answering services, and it can include some smaller services like house numbering, which is really just there to help support if we have new properties being developed, subdivided, etc., and we need to initiate house numbers. This provides a small amount of money to help support that. Transit is certainly a big driver in our electoral areas and Area A specifically. And then this covers a number of other regional services like community justice, victim services, and certainly solid waste management, which is a very large and very complex service that our electoral areas pay into as well.
Great, thank you, Kevin. Is there somewhere that people, just kind of building on this, because he did follow up just saying that looking for a list of kind of the ones that probably have the highest cost for electoral area A, and you've given a good explanation of how kind of depending on what part of area A you are in, that might differ. But is there somewhere that people can go to look at which services they would be paying into and what that requisition cost is?
Absolutely. So a couple of things. We do produce annually what we call a house table report for our directors, and that really kind of outlines the services that each service area kind of pays into and what the year-over-year tax impact is. So we'll be posting that up onto our website shortly. Another way that they can do that is in with your annual rural property tax notice. We always provide a bit of an insert. It's a 2-page insert. It provides some information about some of the key services that you'd be paying into. So often we'll highlight things like our North Island 911 Corporation, which is the 911 call answering that we contribute to. That may also speak to our solid waste service or another service that might be of particular interest. We also do provide some information about the regional hospital district, usually in that insert as well. But that insert also does include a bit of a breakdown of the number of services that each of the electoral areas pay into, and a bit of a comparative year over year as to kind of, how that costing is kind of hitting the taxpayer.
Great, thank you for that. Okay, so we've had another question pop in. Lucy or Kevin, let me know who's best to handle this, to respond to this one. So the question is, can you just explain a little bit more about that, the fact that money in a service for one area can't be moved to cover service in another area, even if there seems to be a bit of an overlap. Why is that the case for us here?
Maybe I'll just give a little start, Kevin, and you probably can add more to it. But it basically comes back to the way your regional districts are structured. A bylaw is created for each service, and that service, it speaks to the need for it to be contained within itself. The bylaw gives authorization to deliver the service and outlines who has to pay, and all those funds need to stay directly with that service. It's basically the way we're structured. Anything else you'd add, Kevin?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it's really important to know that unlike a municipality that really has a single tax base, because all of the services they provide as a local government are available to everybody within a municipal boundary. In a regional district setting, we have upwards of 102 different tax bases because of the nature, as Lucy alluded to, the way these services are structured. So, and that also is driven by the fact that sometimes we also are given or inherit services over time. So for example, those in Area A may be familiar with the recent winding down of the Union Bay Improvement District, which happened about 1.5 years ago. That improvement district operated as an independent local government kind of entity, but decided that they were going to kind of fold and roll their services into us as a regional district. So we took on 3 very distinct services: water, sewer, and street lighting, water, fire, and street lighting. And so because of the nature of how those services come to us, we have to keep them separate. And that's why we really stress that any of the revenues or cash into a service, whether that's through tax requisition, utility rates, any types of user charges, etc., they must stay within that service. That means that if a surplus or a deficit is born in that service in any given year, that needs to be carried forward and stay again within that service. What that does mean as well, though, is that any reserves that are contributed to by those residents within a service area will stay within that service area. We can't say, well, you get service from Merville Fire, for example, but we want to give those over to a park service. We can't do that legally. It's to the benefit of you that have spent time contributing to those, and it's to the benefit of the service delivery and the projects and initiatives that we want to undertake in each of those services.
Great, that's a really helpful explanation. Thank you both. So I'm going to give people another minute or two to add any further questions they might have into the Q&A box. But in the meantime, we had a couple questions that were already here when we joined in today. James, this might actually provide a bit more foundation to your initial question about the garbage and recycling collection. And so the question I'm going to pose to you is, if there's a service that residents don't have now, how can it be added to the financial plan?
Yeah, thanks, Colleen. And this builds a little bit on Kevin's explanation too around services and how regional districts are structured. One of the unique things about regional districts is we have to have that bylaw that describes the purpose and the geographic boundaries and gives us the authority to collect taxes and then also deliver the service. And if we don't have that bylaw, we don't have that service. We're not able to do it. So where there's interest in having a new service put forward, we have to do a few things before we would introduce such a bylaw. We want to understand just what is the purpose? What are we trying to accomplish with that new service? What are the costs and benefits associated with that activity? How much will it take to operate or deliver that service? Is it something that we would want to do in-house with CVRD staff? Is it a partnership with other agencies or community groups or other levels of government? Is it a contract opportunity that we need to hire a third party to help deliver that service? So once we understand all of those different pieces of that service delivery concept, then we would take forward a bylaw to our board. And in most cases, we have to then take that bylaw to the public, those who will end up paying for that service and receiving it, and ask the public for approval. We can get that approval through an alternative approval process, the AAP, or a referendum, or in some cases, there might be some rule within the provincial legislation that lets us proceed more directly. But it's a fairly involved process to understand what is the activity we want to be undertaking, what are the costs and benefits, how we would deliver that, communicating to the public then, of course, what all that means and allowing the public to then make a decision on, do they support this activity or not? And then if it is supported, then we have to build it into our financial planning process. All of that takes months and months to work through and get that authority. So at this stage of time, a new service is something that we would consider for the 2024 financial plan, not something for this year's. But we do that and we take our time because we want to make sure that the service we're proposing is meaningful and the public supports it. There's understanding of what it is that we're undertaking.
Okay, so we have a couple more questions that were here in advance. And so I'm just kind of putting that out for participants today. If there were any other questions that they wanted to add into the Q&A box, please feel free to add them now, and we'll cover these other two questions off with the rest of the team. So the next question, Lucy, I think this one I'm going to pass to you. For residents who would like to present to a meeting and to directors on the topic of a financial plan or budget for a service, do they need to give notice, or are they able to just kind of arrive and present from the audience?
The board committee meetings, they are open to the public. However, if you want to make a presentation, then you must ask in advance. So there is a form on the website, and that's going to go over to legislative services. So once you send that in and you describe a little bit about what your presentation is about, they'll get back to you in 24 hours and yeah, just confirm that they've received, and then they'll schedule you on to the agenda.
Great, thank you. And then just one more that was here in advance. So if any other questions want to be added to the Q&A pot, we're kind of given our last notice. This one I'm going to pass to you, Kevin. If somebody is paying into a service that they don't participate in, or they don't want to participate in, is there an option for people to opt out?
Oh, great question. So, I mean, in essence, there is not a formal opt-out to, kind of option per se. And yet, I think, if you really look at the breadth of services that are provided in a service area, you may realize that you do get value from a service more than you might think. And as I said, it covers a gamut of different things like emergency program, which really provides some emergency preparedness planning for residents and for neighborhoods. That can include things like victim services, weed control for us, areas throughout the valley, and a number of other things, recreation grant services. So we provide, supports to a number of recreation organizations around town so that they can be providing the best possible recreation options for residents and visitors to the valley. I know where that question will often come the most is with respect to solid waste services. So most folks, when they receive their rural property tax notice, will see this line item called CSWM, or Comox Strathcona Waste Management. And the most often question we received here in finance is, well, I don't get garbage pickup at my house because I'm in a rural area. Why is this on my tax bill? Well, that's largely because at the end of the day, that may be very, very true. And James spoke to that earlier. However, that garbage does ultimately have to end up somewhere, and that is our regional landfill facility. As many of you may be aware as well, we're just in the process of commissioning a new regional organics facility. And that initially is going to be provided to our municipal areas, but over time, hopeful that we'll be able to extend those services out to the rural areas as well. So really, there's some key, kind of infrastructure pieces that we have to continue to maintain. Even if you don't have things like garbage direction to your door, you're still your garbage is ultimately making its way to that facility. So that's really where those services become keenly important, and really where they can affect you on literally a day-by-day basis.
Great, thank you for that explanation. Okay, well, I am seeing no further questions being added to the Q&A, so I think that means that we've provided lots of good information for everybody. Thank you to James and Kevin and Lucy for your time presenting and explaining all of this to us today. And thank you also to everybody who was able to join. I've posted just a last slide that has kind of a summary of some of the references that we've talked about through the presentation, so that you can grab them quickly if you like before signing off. But otherwise, I'm just going to say thank you again for sharing your lunch hour with us and giving us this time today. We appreciate it very much, and we wish you a happy afternoon today. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Colleen.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. I'm going to end the recording now.